G'day guys, you're back with MiracleMAX. The mighty Mitsubishi Triton is back in the workshop yet again. This time it has an intermittent, no crank situation. Let's have a look at it. One of the major problems with an intermittent fault is that, hey, it's intermittent. It always comes and goes as it pleases. Now I've tried this several times and each time it started okay. Customer has complained about it coming and going, and he said sometimes he can turn the key just a little bit extra and it seems to work okay. That may indicate an ignition key fault, but we can't put all our eggs in the same basket, can we? We need to diagnose it properly. So let's see if we can get it to play up firstly. Let's reproduce the customer's symptoms. There we go, hear that? I've had it do it for me once and I did hear an audible click down at the solenoid. So whether it's a solenoid fault or whether it's got a voltage drop somewhere, I don't know. I've got to reproduce this fault before I can go any further. This is going to take a while. I pulled out the G-scan for two reasons. Obviously to look for a fault code. Secondly, I've gone into live data at the moment and I've just got my starter switch sorted. Now when I had this on digital data, just the numbers etc, it was very difficult to see when it came and went. So I've got it in graphing mode and that should make it a tad easier to try and find the fault. So what I'm trying to find at the moment is if this engages, so I see obviously a 12 volt signal up here. When I turn it off it drops away. If I have the key in the on position and this registers but I don't get any action happening at my starter motor, then obviously all the control side of things will be working fine. And I would assume, don't assume Max, but it should be at that particular point in time something to do with the starter motor, most likely solenoid. But for now let's just see if we can get this thing to actually play up. Frustrating. Try and get it hot so that it'll play up, but yeah, doesn't seem to be. Okay, look, I could spend forever and a day searching for this thing. I'm going to have a good visual look just in case something is amiss in that particular area. Maybe I'll get my multimeter out and just do some checks down there and see what the voltages down at the solenoid are in particular. As with any voltage related issue, you should always check your battery first. As I mentioned, I've checked my terminals and I'm happy with those. Let's put it to the test, shall we? Let's go through with our Autel little baby tester here and see what it does. Regular flooded, CCA is, what's that? 810 by the looks of things, 810. Let's see what it does. I'll zoom you in, guys. And that's saying it's a good battery. State of health 74%, state of charge 98%. I feel confident that the battery's in good nick. So let's move further forward. Started with the basic checks first, of course, making sure that the battery terminals are tight. Checked all, both the positive and the negative. I've also pulled off the fuse cover and made sure that the relay, this particular one here, it doesn't really show up very well, but it's the one that's got the little motor on it there. That's the starter one, and I've pulled that out and make sure that that's in good condition. Terminals are okay, but I feel that I need to focus on the starter motor itself. Remember, having a very good visual is the important thing, particularly with a vehicle that's done almost 400,000 kilometres, and as you can see by the engine, covered in dirt, etc. It's had a bit of grief over the years. So let's have a look at some basic things first. Connections, terminals, those sort of things. I've managed to gain some access through the side of the vehicle, left-hand side, and if we cruise in through here, I was able to, bear with, pull off a little flappy thing. There's my flappy thing. Just got that out the road. Then I can see my starter motor. I've pulled off the control wire that goes onto the starter motor. So in other words, your starter switch from your ignition switch via a relay, etc, etc. As I always say, have a good visual. As I've pulled it off, let's just have a sneaky look at the terminal. If I can focus it on there for you. See the colour of that terminal? Man, that's been arcing for some time, hasn't it? That's possibly what our fault is, guys. Just through a quick visual. It's possible that there's been some arcing there, and of course every time he goes to start it, it'll work, and then all of a sudden there'll be a huge voltage drop across the wire onto that particular terminal, and then she won't start, mate. She'll just go click, 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 because there's not enough voltage going onto the actual solenoid. So what's the solution? Well, it should be fairly simple, I'd imagine. Polish that up with a bit of wet and dry, maybe a bit of sandpapery type stuff, replace that terminal, and Bob's your uncle. Let's hope. I can't really reproduce the fault. Maybe I can just pop it back on and put it on loosely and see if it'll reproduce the fault before I cut it and tidy it up. So just by disturbing that starter motor wire, I've been able to get it to play up more on a regular basis. Let's see if we can get it to play up. There we go. What do you notice about the signal there? The control is working. Off, on, off, on. So I know the control side of things is working fine. That's why I feel pretty sure that that starter motor wire, the solenoid wire, the control wire, is at fault. It looked pretty dodgy. Let's tidy it up, put it back together, and because it's in this no start condition right now, and if I do nothing else apart from replace that terminal, then obviously that's the fault. Let's give it another shot, shall we, Max? Yay! Excellent. That's what we like to see, intermittent faults that become mittent. I ended up pulling off the wheel to gain access to that little terminal there to tidy it up, as well as replace that connector. I had to get this wiring loom here and move it that way a little bit to take tension off the starter wire there. But the new terminal's on, she's all looking good. So there's only one test to do. It has to be a consistent test. There should be no faltering, there should be no faults with it. So let's give it a burl and see what happens. So right from the first turn of the key, it should go and crank. There should be no issues with it whatsoever. It should be consistent. If it fails at all, then we know that we haven't sorted out the issue entirely. That was definitely a fault, but have we solved the issue entirely? Every single turn of the key should be consistent. Let's see what it does. Damn it. Well, that was fault number one, but we really haven't fixed it, have we? Maybe it's across the solenoid itself. If I put my multimeter on this side of the connector and that side of the connector, there should be no voltage drop whatsoever. If there's voltage drop, then we know that we've got an issue. That's next. A little bit difficult for you guys to see, but I've got my multimeter, the positive and the negative, connect either side of the solenoid. The big, I guess you could say, the big terminals that go through it. One comes directly from the battery and the other one goes onto the solenoid itself. And because I've only got one set of hands, I've set you guys on a milk crate with the multimeter. Now at the moment, the power is coming from the battery, going through, what would that be? That would be the pull-in winding on the solenoid, down through the field onto earth. When it cranks, that voltage should disappear. But if it remains, that means that our solenoid has poor contacts, or we might see a voltage drop there. So I'll crank it backwards and forwards, then I'll have to review the footage. So just keep an eye on that voltage there, guys, and see what it does. Okay, what's it reading? So I've just reviewed the footage and we saw come up here was 11.6 or something like that under cranking conditions. And you think, oh, that's not a problem, it's just dropped 1 volt. But no, this is voltage drop test in line. So just imagine that you've got a positive wire here and a positive wire here, which is exactly what the solenoid is. And there's a bar that sits over the top of them like that. Now the drop, what we saw was actually 11.6 volts. We have dropped 11.6 volts. So in actual fact, we've only got about a volt that's available, considering our battery voltage is about, 12.67, whatever it is. So we've actually dropped most of our voltage, and that is why it plays up. You probably noticed when it finally did start, all that voltage disappeared. Our multimeter went to whoosh, all the voltage disappeared. But when it did play up under those cranking conditions, the voltage remained, so it was 11.6 volts that we had actually dropped. We were missing 11.6 volts. So it needs another solenoid, minimum. There's probably one final test we need to do before we claim that the solenoid is knackered. You can see I've pulled off one of the leads. On my main battery lead, coming from the battery, this fella here, I've got my positive multimeter lead on, and the other one I've got on a good known earth that's going to an engine mount, which is actually on the chassis. So I know that that's in good condition, and if we come back to here, we have 12.76 volts, which is battery voltage. Now, that should not disappear when I crank it. It may drop just a fraction, but it shouldn't drop much at all. So let's see what happens there. And as usual, it doesn't play up when you want it to. Alright, I've just given the solenoid a bit of a tap. Let's see if we can get it to play up. If it does play up, as you saw the voltage drop there before, probably the minimum that you should drop is about 9.6 volts under cranking, and we saw that that was well above that. That's not an issue, but if we see a major drop, then that would be a problem. But I've just given the solenoid a bit of grief, so hopefully it'll play up, and if it does, then we should see a consistent voltage here. Possibly we might even see no voltage change here because the solenoid contacts have not closed. Hopefully I can get it to play up. Okay, it's playing up now. What's that voltage reading? It should be, yeah, around about the 12-ish, I would imagine. If those contacts didn't pull in properly, there might be a slight voltage drop, but I doubt that there will be a huge amount. Let's review the footage. So to me, after all that testing, it's quite definitive that the solenoid is faulty. It's the end of the year, so I don't know if any shops are open with regard to buying some parts, and I'll have to pull the starter off and then do the solenoid and yada yada yada. So I'll have to do some phone calls first and then let the customer know and take it from there. But yep, solenoid's on the way out. I rang up the other day to order the solenoid for this particular starter, but unfortunately everyone was shut, being the end of year holiday. So I rang them up again when they were open. They then informed me that there was 5 different starters on this particular engine. What a pain in the butt. So I've got the customer back in again, and I've been able to pull off the wheel again and have a look. Now, eventually I found a sticker and got the details off it. Unfortunately, they were all covered in paint, so I had to carefully remove all that before I could get the details. So I've rung them up, and they've now told me that they only have a starter at this point. They're going to ring their supplier and see if they can actually get some more details so that we can get the solenoid separate. It may end up costing the customer quite a bit, maybe a starter. Ouch. Firstly, let it be said that generally, as a rule, I would replace this starter in its entirety. It's no use replacing a solenoid when most likely the brushes, bushes, etc. are all worn out. But, that being said, this customer is about to sell his car, so he doesn't want to spend a fortune on it. He just wants it up and running for now. So I went to get a solenoid for it, and the auto electrician told me, it won't be the solenoid, it'll be the brushes, etc. You know when you question yourself and you start to think, oh, maybe he's right and I'm wrong. But remember all those tests that we did? Don't throw parts at things. Carry out tests and diagnose properly. Now I knew that I had done a voltage drop test across the 2 terminals of the solenoid. Those 2 blokes there, okay? And I knew that I had a voltage drop. So I reinforced in my head that I had done testing properly. He then took it out into the workshop, did some tests on it himself, bought it out, and he goes, oh yeah, well, yeah, we did get it to play up. It is the solenoid that's faulty, but the whole thing had it. It's noisy, etc. And I said, yes, I appreciate that, but this guy just wants to sell it. So it reinforced to me that you don't throw parts at things just for the sake of it, and also that put faith in your tests, in your multimeter, your oscilloscope, whatever it is. Now this guy has gone 4-wheel driving recently, and he went through we'll call it a puddle, shall we? It was so deep that his whole car pretty much went under. He had to pull out his seats, his carpet and everything else just to get all the water out. He had to wash his carpets and everything. That's how far he went in. So keeping that in mind, it's no shock when we have a look at this solenoid. have a look at the colour of the solenoid. When we pull that out, look at that there. It's all rusted, isn't it? So no wonder the poor thing is having trouble pulling in. Now, that's not to say that the solenoid bar that goes across here is not faulty as well, but this is causing a mechanical drag which would create an extra problem. That being said, I'm going to stick on another solenoid and that should fix the problem for now. Hopefully enough time to sell it, and he can get himself, who knows, another Triton. Whoa! Excuse me if I'm looking a bit grotty and feral and sweaty. It's 36 degrees today, so I'm really keen to get this job done. So I fitted the solenoid, I bench tested the starter, fitted the starter, reattached the battery. Now I'm just about to try it for the first time, but hopefully the solenoid has fixed that dropout that we experienced, that voltage drop. So first things first, make sure it's out of gear, then we'll give it a shot, hey? Of course, never get cocky, continually test it and test it. So that was 12 times, an even dozen, to make sure that it was working correctly. It didn't drop out at all, so I'm happy with those results. Time to stick the wheel back on, get it all sorted, and give it back to the customer. I've now completed all the other work that was required to be done on this vehicle, including this here solenoid, which was clearly faulty. I might even pull it apart to show the students what a damaged or faulty solenoid looks like. Been on a road test, happy with the results, and I can tick this off the list once again. I hope you enjoyed this video, guys. It really reinforces to me to trust the results that you have in front of you. Don't second guess the results. Always question your thinking and the diagnostic path that you're taking, but don't question the results. That's why I felt confident that the solenoid was at fault. If you haven't subscribed to this channel, please do so and give it a like. Feel free to comment down below. Don't forget about that notification bell so that you don't miss any future videos. Until next time, guys, this is MiracleMAX signing off. I will catch you later.